All right, good evening. It is 7 p.m. and you know what time it is. It is our Tampa Bay Spark Roundtable series. We are so excited to be with you all tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. If you just finished dinner, we hope that you can just relax and spend some time with us tonight and be a part of this incredible conversation. If you're just having dinner, if you're eating, we just want you to, just sit back, relax, and just enjoy this conversation that we're about to have tonight. Good evening to our Facebook and YouTube Live Spark Roundtable attendees. Welcome to our Spark Digital Roundtable Series event, Black Men and Mental Health. This is a final installment in our series on mental health. So last year, we hosted an incredible panel of experts to discuss the state of mental health in the Black community, and it was incredible. And out of that conversation, we felt like it was really important for us to highlight Black men and their unique story and their experiences. So tonight, I cannot emphasize enough the amazing, diverse group of leaders who will share their heart, their wisdom, and their knowledge, and how we can elevate the mental and holistic health of our Black men. So my name is Tammy Charles. I am the founder and managing director of Tampa Bay Spark. Our mission at Tampa Bay Spark is to equip, train business and community professionals to co-create and implement strategies and solutions that will lead to economic justice, equality, inclusion for the communities that they serve and lead. Spark Digital Roundtable Series. This event is designed to create an intentional space for courageous conversations that are meant to educate, inform, and equip purpose-driven leaders, conscious leaders to implement authentic justice and equitable practices within their sphere of influence. You can learn more about Tampa Bay Spark at www.tampabayspark.com. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram to be updated on our upcoming events and resources. Now, I want to give a major shout out to my amazing team who put this event together. Erica Braham is the Equity Operations Manager at the Tampa Bay Healthcare Collaborative. She's dope. You'll see her in the audience. Jessica Vega Eugene is a Communication Specialist at Vistra. Bess Georges is the E-Learning Specialist, 6th grade math teacher. Monique McLeod is the CEO of the Management Suite. Alicia Hinson is the Annual Gift Specialist at Gulfside Hospice and Pasco Palliative Care. Woo, that was a mouthful. If you can give a virtual round of applause to the amazing Tampa Bay Spark team, we could not do this event without them. Again, share your comments and takeaways from this event and tag us at Tampa Bay Spark and include the hashtags TB Spark Ideas, hashtag TB Spark Change. All right, that's enough. Let's jump into this conversation. So I am so honored to introduce our moderator and our speakers tonight. Our moderator is Rod Carter. He anchors News Channel 8's weekend evening newscasts at 6 p.m., 8 p.m., and 11 p.m. So if you watch TV, you'll see him on there. His face is super familiar. He's basically famous. He's also a general assignment reporter 3 days a week. Rod is on the board of the National Association of Black Journalists as Region 3 Director. So we can give a virtual round of applause for Rod Carter. We're so honored that you are here tonight. Carl Davis, he is the president of the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Black Advisory Council. Where's Carl Davis? There he is. And he's the president of the 100 Black Men of Tampa Bay. He is a Derrick Rose Charities Youth Programs Task Force member and a life coach certified in the areas of DISC, EQ-I 2.0. Welcome, Mr. Carl Davis. Honored to have you. We have Mr. Tavis Myrick tonight. He is a business leader and educator with a multifaceted impact on youth in underserved communities through his innovative nature and passion for education. And as an educator, Mr. Myrick is dedicated to guiding students to succeed while inspiring an insatiable passion for learning and a culture for success. Tavis, it's such an honor to have you tonight. Dr. Wright is an iconic leader in our Tampa Bay community. At the state level, he is a member of the African American History Task Force and a gubernatorial appointee to the board of directors of the Florida Fund for Minority Teachers. He is also the founder and CEO of Samuel L. Wright Consulting. He is an honorary member of Florida Blue Key and is listed in many editions of Who's Who in Black America. Yes, we're so honored to have Dr. Wright. Dr. Falogi earned his doctorate degree in counseling psychology from the University of Missouri. As a graduate student, Dr. Falogi published in peer-reviewed psychology journals, was invited a plenary speaker at the American Psychological Association, and was tapped by MU's Rollins Society, a prestigious secret society that recognizes graduate students who have significantly advanced the well-being of the community beyond the scope of their academic work. It's great to have Dr. Falogi with us tonight. Jackson, Mississippi native Jerron Brown is a licensed clinical social worker with over 9 years of experience in working in the mental health field. He currently holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Southern Mississippi and a master's degree from Jackson State University, social work. And last but not least, so we're excited to have Dr. Jerron Brown, right? Super excited to have you. And then last but not least, Jalen Robinson is a founder of the nonprofit organization Bubba, which is Brothers United Brothers Alliance, aka Bubba. Bubba is an organization that focuses on improving the lives of men and boys through effective mentorship, rigorous academic support, and relevant engagement. Currently, he serves as a director of education for a local private all-boys school in Hillsborough County. Can we give a virtual round of applause for our amazing panelists? We're so excited to have them with us tonight. Now, before we get started, I just want to ask the audience a quick question. This conversation tonight is about mental health. So what has been your experiences with therapy, and what stigma do you believe exists with accessing mental health services? So if you can share some of your ideas, we want to make this as engaging as possible. Now, I'm going to shut up and I'm going to turn it over to our amazing moderator, Rod Carter, to kick off this amazing conversation.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Good evening to this great group of panelists. We hope to have a very good, robust conversation tonight. Everybody can hear me okay, right? Thumbs up. Yes, we're all good. Mental health is something that, unfortunately, people of color do not talk about enough, and men do not talk about enough. So the fact that we are here in this space to have a great conversation about that with this amazing group of men really does give my heart joy. And I hope that somebody can learn something and take something from this. Besides the physical factors that contribute to mental health disorders, there are a host of other social factors that we know that contribute as well. They create a negative environment in African-American men. In fact, every day, on a daily basis, the Black man has to deal with racism, inequality, economic oppression, all of that trying to care for himself and his family. And dealing with all of this with the harsh reality can lead to increased depression, it can lead to frustration, it can lead to low self-esteem and feelings of hopelessness. And so we have to change that. And that is the point of this conversation. So I'll jump right in and start asking questions. And the first question I want to ask is for Carl Davis. And Mr. Davis, tell me something. Among African Americans, especially males, the possibility of being someone, if you will, making a significant contribution to society and attaining that basic respect and self-esteem is seldom a reality, predisposing a lot of people to suicidal and homicidal acts and thoughts of destruction. Has this definition of what it means to be a strong Black man changed? And what comes along with that definition and the pressures that kind of heaps on people?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Carter. And I want to thank Tampa Bay Spark for this all-important issue on Black men and mental health. Mr. Carter, go back to your question. You first have to look at a historical perspective of where the pendulum was back a long time ago of being a strong Black man. You know, back in slavery, men were expected to do several things. One of the things they were not expected to do was to actually talk back. They felt threatened, they felt angry, they harbored a lot of hostility, they couldn't speak up, and so their feelings were definitely suppressed. And if they spoke up, then their family would have been jeopardized. So now the pendulum is swinging currently, and we start looking at what it means to be a strong Black man. Most of the time when you think of a strong Black man, you think of a person that holds a job, provides for themselves and their family, and also successfully interact in a system. And so to characterize a strong Black man these days is if you're not doing those things, then you're not considered a strong Black man, or your manhood is actually tested because you're not holding down a job or you're not providing for your family. And then also when you look at the perspective of has a narrative changed, I think it has changed the definition of a strong Black man. And so I sort of look at what in Corinthians, it talks about the Apostle Paul, when he talked about when I became a man, I put away childish things. And so currently, how do I look at that? It's akin to what we see the Black strong men going through today. They have to actually endure a process and become comfortable in their own skin. And I think Black men, strong Black men are doing that today. They have to be in touch with themselves. They have to have a personality and understand his or her needs and stuff, especially when it comes down to the family. You have to understand your flaws. You have to understand your strength. You have to understand your sexuality. And you have to understand your fears, the things that are really keeping you trapped. And so to be a strong Black man in today, you have to put away those childish things. And you have to be able to wrestle with your thoughts sometimes and acknowledge them, and even come to look at it in such a way that, you know what, it's okay for me to have a little bit of vulnerability. So being a strong Black man, first of all, is the willingness to be honest with yourself. It is also knowing yourself and knowing your strength. And therefore, a strong Black man can be confident, open, strong, and vulnerable. So that's my definition of a strong Black man today. And that's the perspective I look at it today.
So I want to bring in Mr. Myrick and Mr. Jalen. I got a question for you guys. You have two programs that deal with young men in that formative age group. You're talking teenagers and young men who are growing. What do you tell them about what being a strong Black man is, and about the possibility of showing vulnerabilities? I mean, I think all of us as men on this call can recall us saying, you know, be strong, don't say that, don't cry, don't do this. And it can have an impact on how you respond to things and how you feel about yourself. You know, I'll tell you, you know, in all fairness and honesty, my mother to this day still goes, don't you let those people see you upset. And my response is, they gonna see me upset either one way or the other. So you might want to let them see me calm upset. But my point is, we're all taught to hold stuff in and not to express it. How do you guys handle that with your young men? And I'll start with you, Jay.
Good evening. Good evening. So I was having a lot of thoughts as we are having this conversation, and I'm glad you brought us in as it relates to the youth, because, you know, their definition of a strong Black man looks a lot different than what our definition of a strong Black man looks like. And one thing that I try to do as much as I can with our organization is I try to put as many brothers in front of our boys as I can. Brothers in different areas doing different things, from different backgrounds and different professions, that have walked different lives and that do different kind of things, so that they know there's not one type of Black man that they got to be. There's not one type of thing that they, you know, have to do. I like to show them options and to show them, you know, that it doesn't always have to look glittery and gold. Sometimes you're going to start here and you're going to have to go through some things to get that strength. So, you know, it really boils down to all the different perspectives that are there.
And Tavis, same for you. What do you talk to your young men and tell them about? I mean, they're in this age, they're in the formative age where they're becoming men.
I kind of echo what Jalem just said, because we spend a lot of time focusing on how to redefine manhood or explaining who a man is supposed to be in society. And I always tell them that it starts with the need to be vulnerable and the need not to hold things in. Because what happens when they hold it in, they have outbursts in school, which causes them to be suspended and expelled. So we have to teach them to be able to communicate their thoughts and their feelings in an honest and respectable manner. that's where it starts. So I always tell them, you should be able to share with whoever adult you need to talk to, whatever you need to say, as long as it's in an honest and respectful manner.
And Dr. Wright, I'm going to bring you in because I want to ask you, just, growing up in a different era and a different definition, I guess, then of what, people consider to be manhood and being a man and showing strength and vulnerability. I mean, it's very difficult because now, first of all, I couldn't have imagined this conversation happening 50, 60 years ago with a group of brothers on a call talking about being vulnerable. That's not something we're supposed to show. How, in your experiences, what have you seen over the course of time and the change in what we as men talk about and do? And you're on mute. There you go.
I came from a family with a pretty strict father, and my father wouldn't spare the rod. He would beat our behinds. He would get tired in beating us because that's what he did. And so we were just real careful about doing those things that were not right. But we always saw the fact that he tried to discipline us. He tried to he worked. My mother worked more because he had jobs that he would be laid off every now and then. But I think my fundamental background and beginning and foundation was laid in the church. I saw good role models in the church. I attended church frequently, because life for me ain't been no crystal stair. And so when I was able to go and hear powerful sermons, I would internalize those sermons. And that is what helped me through all of the trying times, and what kept me going and kept me motivated. And I think, we don't have to be totally involved in organized religion, although I support that because that was my upbringing. But I do believe we have to have a spirituality about ourselves, to believe in a supreme being, because it's everything that happens in many instances beyond me. And I do think that, I was taught to express myself. In fact, I was quite vocal about fighting for parity and equity and equality. And I kind of learned to try to do it in a diplomatic fashion, and that's kind of what I learned to do as a kid. And when you do things like that way, you're respected in some way. Folk may not particularly like what you say, but they respect you because you are able to articulate things in a very positive fashion. And that's and we had good role models, people who took care of their families, who provided for them. And certainly that's what I've tried to model, with perhaps what my father did by trying to take care of my children. And I said that to society, is that if we could take care of our own households, those are 2 or 3 less folk that the system has to take care of. And we can invest in our own children and seek if they stay out of the criminal justice system and that kind of thing. And we could say, thank God, when we could get them to that point in our lives, because it's not easy, because we all are challenged. Even those of us are challenged at our ages. So we know it's very challenging for young Black men coming up. So those are some of my experiences. And my issue with young people is they saw a lot of role models selling drugs, and they thought that was the thing to do. But that is really not the really way to make it. You have to really just work hard, do as our parents did. They had a strong work ethic. They worked from sun up to sundown to acquire what they had. And then once they earned it, it was theirs. They didn't have to worry about anybody taking it away from them.
Jerron Brown, I want to ask you a question about something. You went into the mental health profession. Why did you decide to do that? Was it tough for you to make that decision? And I mean, given what we all just talked about in how, African-American men don't necessarily talk about emotions and feelings and go into a psychologist or go into a therapist because somehow that equates to weakness. Talk about your path in getting to becoming a mental health professional and why that was important.
Yes, sir. I definitely do that. So I would say when I first went to college, now growing up first, I didn't know anything about mental health. I was raised in the church. And so, in the church, a lot of times when it comes to mental health, we don't talk about those things. We pray to God about it. Or if an individual has any mental health related issue, they're dealing with the devil. And so we're going to pray the devil out of them and hope that they get better. And so when I went to college, first went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I first started majoring in biological sciences. And so I was like, you know what? Yeah, I don't know if this is the right field for me. So I think I may need to change something. So I stumbled onto psychology. So I got in the psychology field, did my undergrad, got my undergrad degree. And while I was in the psychology field, I remember people telling me, they were saying, hey, you know, you have a degree in psychology on the undergrad level, but you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with that. So me being 18, 19, 20, me being a knucklehead, you know, I didn't believe it. And so, you know, I graduated from college and I was like, okay, now what? And so I decided on my own, and I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna go and do an internship to just kind of get some experience to try to see what I may want to do. So I did an internship at a place called Mississippi Children's Home Services. And so it was a shelter for kids that were coming out, they were just getting taken from their home. They were entering the foster care system. So I got there, started working with different kids, and there was this young man who was about 5 or 6 years old, little black child. He had just been removed from his grandmother's house. Very sad. He was very emotional, very hurt, and I can understand. So I started working with that young man, and you know, throughout this time, they normally stayed there about 2 weeks. So those 2 weeks that he was there, me and him formed a connection. I got to work with him, did a lot of amazing work with him, got to work with other kids, and I met a social worker while I was there. The social worker turned me on to getting into the mental health field. And I remember her telling me, she was like, hey, I don't see you going back to school and getting no master's in social work. I can see you doing something in sales. I said, nah, I don't want to do anything in sales. I'm going to go back and get my master's in social work. Did that. I graduated with my degree in social work in 2017 of June. Started my first job in the field at a nonprofit organization called Catholic Charities. It was I was a foster care therapist. And so 2 months later, I took my exam, and I remember my supervisor, she told me, she was like, hey, Jerron, you'll be getting your first client today. And so I said, okay, then. I had went to take my exam. I didn't tell her that I had passed my exam. You know, sometimes as men, we don't want people to know if we fail or not, you know, that makes us look weak. So I never told her that. So I came back to the office and I went into the double doors, and she was like, your first client is in there. Walked into the double doors, and my first client was that same African-American boy that I had met 3 years prior. And that's how I know that I was called to be in the mental health field, because there are not enough men in the mental health field as African-American. And so when you have an individual that looks like you, it makes you a little bit more comfortable when talking to people. Mm-hmm. And let's be honest, you know, when we think of the word therapy or think of mental health providers, a lot of times the first thing that comes to people's mind is a white man or a white lady. I'm gonna go sit on somebody's couch that doesn't look like me. And so I wanted to be able to be a representation of somebody that may need services. They can come to me and say, hey, you look like me, brother. Can you help me with whatever I'm going through? And so that's pretty much what led me to get in the field.
Let me put a point in that, because I want to bring in Dr. Falogi. One of the things that he touched on was really image and, you know, the current portrayal of a black man. Seeing a black male as a therapist is not something necessarily that we always see. But talk for a moment, if you will, and I'll go ahead and remind you to unmute yourself. Talk for a moment, if you will, about how black men are portrayed in the media. And when I say not just the media, not just so y'all don't start yelling at me, because y'all know I do news, not just the news media, because trust me, there's an internal fight that I have about that alone. And you need to know that some of us are internally fighting about those portrayals. But just in the general sense, the social media now, all of those things have changed the image that we see. Talk for a moment about that image and how we can have more Jerrons and less of whatever we see as the portrayal of a black man.
Come on, there's only one and only Jerron.
Well, you know, good point.
I'm just playing. I had to teach you. All right, so let me just start off by saying my only intent with what I'm about to say is love for all humans. I do believe in the human race. And so part of that love is exploring the things that separate us from each other. And we as humans have created some really unhealthy things called systems of oppression. And one of those systems of oppression happens to advantage whites and disadvantage people of color and black folks. And that system of oppression is called racism, white supremacy. And it's like water, and we're all in the fishbowl. White folks, black folks, everybody, we're all in it. And white folks just happen to be advantaged by it. And we as people of color, black folks, are disadvantaged by it. And it's everywhere. It's in the society, it's in our institutions, and it's in us as individuals. And so media is an institution in the society, right? And so media reinforces and creates racial hierarchy, racism in the society. And so Sometimes this is conscious, like there's conscious effort to create these stereotypes and discriminations and prejudices. And other times it's unconscious, but either way, it still has an impact. And so some of these examples of how this is created in media is the underrepresentation of Black men in roles outside of criminals and athletes and entertainers. So, you know, I'm sure y'all can count on, you know, your hands how many heroes and intellectuals you see on TV day to day. Also, an underrepresentation is experts that offer commentary and analysis. Yeah, you can name Van Jones and Don Lemon, but those are the exception, right? And then you also have these negative stereotypes that are exaggerated. So, you know, Black people being aggressors or all Black people being in poverty. But there's so much variability in Blackness, but those are the ones that are presented to us in media. And then, you know, the one that really kills me and the one that I've really had to protect myself from is Black death projected in the media. And I'm glad you brought up social media, Rod, because I realized it's not, you don't see other races being lynched on TV like that. Like, and that is not normal, but we've normalized that as a society, and media has normalized that. And that's not okay because that has an impact on us. And so what it does to us as a collective, like everybody, a human collective, is it narrows the positive perceptions that we have of Black men. You know, you just start seeing Black men as athletes and entertainers, right? And because most of our communities are segregated, you know, I know everybody thinks we're an integrated country, but most of where we live is segregated. And so what you see on TV is not really reality, right? And so conversely, you also have these expanded negative perceptions of Black men. And so these contribute to the stereotypes, the prejudice, and the discrimination that we experience as Black folks, and it reinforces racism, white supremacy. And so for Black men specifically, this increases our anxiety, this increases our self-consciousness related to, reaffirming some of these stereotypes. And then most importantly, this internalized oppression. We start to hate ourselves where we don't even need white folks to do it. We start doing it ourselves. Listen to what we talk about in our music. Rap and hip hop started off as a form of activism, as a form of resistance. And now it reinforces racial hierarchy. You know, look at how we talk about our brothers. Look at how we talk about women. Look at how we talk about Black women. That has implications on how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about our family unit.
And let me ask you this while we're right there at that point. How does that manifest itself into the way we feel about ourselves? And what does that cause? What damage does that do to our mental health? And anybody can jump in on this. Anybody can jump in, but I want Dr. Rubin to answer first.
I can't tell you how many Black men have talked about. I mean, I'll give you an example. I did a Black males group with adolescent males in foster care, and one of the Black men, he said he wanted to pull his skin off, and that hurt. I will never forget that. I mean, it hurts me right now just saying it. But it's this internalized self-hatred. We don't love ourselves. We don't like ourselves because that's what racism has taught us. We don't know anything. We don't know who we are. We think our history started in slavery. We don't know about Mansa Musa, who was the richest man in history. You know, we don't know that the Greeks went to Egypt to get educated. So we gave civilization to the world. And so when you don't have that history, you believe what you're told in school, which is not the full truth.
Anybody else want to jump in? You stopped me for a second with the pull your skin off comment. I know people feel that way, but it's harsh when it comes at you and you hear it, because it's not easy by any stretch of imagination.
Well, Ron, let me say that I had gone to 2 trips to Africa. 95, I went to Dakar, Senegal, West Africa. And in 1997, I went to South Africa, Johannesburg, Pretoria, Soweto. Got a chance to meet His Excellency Nelson Mandela. And I think that's what really motivated me to give birth to the Tampa Bay Black Heritage Festival, because I wanted our children to understand who they really are. You know, they are from kings and queens, but if they don't understand their history, they'll never know where they're going. And that's one of the reasons why I worked to give birth to that festival. Let me say something to you. I was so committed to get that festival off the ground that I said to the University of South Florida administrators that I would refuse a promotion, because I was just finishing my doctorate, if I could not take that festival and get that festival off the ground. I was just that committed to make sure young boys and young girls knew who they were and from whence they've come, so they can have some self-esteem and be able to move their agenda, because that's the issue that Dr. Rubin talked about. We don't know who we are because we think we are slaves. And we were not, we were serving, we built this country and built, like you say, the pyramids in Africa and everything else. So our people are bright people and they're brainy and they have a lot of intellect and they have a lot to bring to the table. But if we don't continue to educate them about from whence we've come, they'll never know where we're going.
I'm going to slide back to Tavis and Jalem about this, because one of the things that I wonder is, what do the young men that you talk to, what do they feel? How do they feel about themselves?
It's really just as Dr. Rubin says, a lot of them, if they have an awareness of anything, they're not really comfortable in their own skin. On Tuesdays, I go to the jail and I do a mentoring group with 3 different groups of 16 and 17-year-old men or boys, really, that have committed whatever kind of crimes they've committed that caused them to be there. And I had a kid that told me the other day that he felt like as soon as he's been there so long, which I don't exactly know how long he's been there, but in his mind, it's so long that he can't even see himself being free. Like, so when I'm trying to talk to him about establishing goals for himself and creating an action plan so that when he gets out, he'll have a plan to continue and go forward in his future, he can't even envision himself being free. So he can't even dream in his mind. And so part of my journey with him is just trying to get him to understand, you're still a kid. You can dream. You can accomplish anything in this world that you want to accomplish as long as you put forth the work.
Jalem?
And, we can go on all night with stories about, different things that have been shared with us in the work that we do. But what it just keeps on reminding me is, that's why it's so important for us to go back and to teach and to educate and to have these programs and to facilitate these conversations and go back and talk to these boys, because most of the time they really just need somebody to talk to, somebody to listen to them, that's not going to judge them, that's not going to ask them, why they said it like that or why they're using this language, but somebody that they can just let it all out to. So, a lot of that stuff comes from them not knowing their history, but a lot of them haven't been exposed to it. They haven't been shown. It's not in the household. It's not in the schools, like you said. So where do they find this stuff? So that's why it's really important, the work that we're doing, going back and really having those programs and working with those boys and working with those young people. Because if we don't, who will? They ain't doing it now.
There's a James Baldwin quote, and I'm actually, Mr. Carl, I'm coming right to you. There's a James Baldwin quote that says, "I can't believe the things you say because I see the things you do." It is very hard to tell young men, you can do this and you can do that, when they see different things coming at them. And that leads me to a question from someone in the chat that said, Black men are victimized by law enforcement in this country, and cops constantly get away with murder. It's detrimental to our young boys to constantly see that. Carl, as a law enforcement officer and being a part of that system, how do you turn that? And I know you're like, Lord, not this question today. I know, but you know what? We're going to have a real conversation. We're going to have the conversation. Everybody got to be on the spot. Dr. Rubin put me on the spot by media, so I'm coming to you. I'm passing it on. No, all jokes aside, but how do you talk to these young men about what they hear and how great they can be if they're still bombarded with all these images and then this negativity of how they interact with law enforcement?
And thank you. That's a real important question, because in working in Tavis, I appreciate your work inside the county jail. I worked in the county jail as well, and talking with the young Black youth, they really don't have a sense of awareness about who they are. And so you're trying to, first of all, as an officer, you have to represent yourself. You have to look the part of an officer. In other words, your uniform needs to be pressed, shoes need to be polished. And so you start with an image, okay? And then when that seems to open up a little bit of respect because they're observing you. But then one of the things that I noticed in talking with youth is that when you start asking them questions, do they know who they are? They don't have a clue. And so in those young minds, so you have to edge them on to say, what are you good at? Just tell me what you're good at. All right. And so you all of y'all have heard of a SWOT analysis. What areas do you think you can improve at? Okay. So if you had an opportunity to use your strength, what would you do with that? And then if you don't use what you have, look how you might become sort of a victim. Or look how all of a sudden now, these things start working against you. So you try to help them bring about their self-awareness. And then part of that mentoring process, especially I work with Derrick Brooks Youth Charities, that, these youth seem to be so angry. We teach an anger management class, and they're all full of venom, it appears, that, you can't say, y'all believe in just saying, excuse me, or pardon me, or I'm sorry, or no, well, they tested my manhood. In the young minds, they tested the manhood. And so their regulation, their ability to temper their own anger, it's you really have to allow them to sort of express themselves verbally. And how do you keep them motivated as well, knowing that, hey, listen, you're 15 years old right now. And what's going to happen when you're 16, 17 years old? What's on your plate right now? What about goals? What about your aspirations? And I was mentoring one kid, and he was a senior in school. And I asked him, does he have any goals? And he said, senior, get ready to graduate. He said, no, I don't really have any goals. And so you have to help them identify with that. And then empathy is so crucial nowadays. How do you allow them, or how do you get them to see how you walk in somebody else's shoes or see somebody else's struggle? Then the last one, you have to know that, listen, in order for you to adapt in today's climate, especially being a young Black man, you have to have these social skills as well. And if you don't have these social skills, you're gonna be ousted. So in looking at the totality of all of those things and talk with our young men, I think the most important thing is being able to show them who they are, and so they can actually see it and give them examples as well.
I want to circle back to this conversation that we were having specifically about therapy and about speaking to professionals. How do you talk to not just young men, and the thing I love about this panel right here is I think we have a variety of age groups represented here, and that is very key. How do you talk to Black men, period, regardless of age, and say, it is quite all right to have a talk with a therapist?
Well, let me just say that when I was at the University of South Florida, Antoine Fisher, I believe his name is, came to speak to us, and he said, we are so readily available to get checkups from medical doctors, podiatrists, and whomever. He said, well, we fail to get a mental health checkup. And I look back at the scripture with the scriptures. God didn't give me a spirit of fear, but love, power, and a sound mind. When we are operating without a sound mind, and we are not in love, not loving humanity, then there's an issue. We need to really kind of find out how we can get some help to do that. And it's like you said, it's common. It happens a lot. I've known family members to go to psychiatrists and get those mental health checkups. And they were in awe when they saw the number of people who came through the doors. Many of them were educators, all different professions. And we just need to make sure we understand it's okay to go and get yourself checked up. That mental health checkup is crucial, because if the mind is not right, God knows that nothing else is in order.
But Dr. Wright, you know what somebody's gonna say, just what Jerron said. I mean, baby, just pray. It'll be all right. And my response always is like, yeah, pray on your way to the doctor. It'll be okay. And I always say to myself, if someone cut off your arm, you wouldn't just say, I'm gonna pray that this grows back or stops bleeding. I mean, and I make light of it, but I'm very serious. We need to, how do we face those fears?
That's right.
And reality, one fear that I've always had is like, well, if I go, like I'm opening Pandora's box, and more of what's there that I don't even know is there might come flooding out, and I just don't want to deal. How do we tell me to not do that too?
Well, I just want to say, just in brief, that God has placed everybody in the earth that we could benefit from. Even a thug and a homeless person on the street can give you some of the best advice that you won't ever get. And it's likewise for mental health counselor, therapists, and we just got to be able to see life that way. We can't look down on people because of their status and what degrees they have, because those are the ones that may fail you. But there are people who the average Joe Blow who can really give you a hell of an education, and that's what we need to understand. But that's understanding that we have to look at humanity as a gift to all of us, and not look at what they bring to the table and what degrees they have and where they live and what kind of cars they drive.
I'm going to slide to Jerron because there's a comment specifically about a comment that you made about therapists and white therapists attempting to kind of fit us all into the same like response box. Is that what your experience has been too? And you can see the comment that just popped really right up on your screen.
Yeah, personally, because I'm a therapist, and that's something that I want people to know. Therapists also need therapists. And so when it came to me actually looking for a therapist, because, you know, as a therapist, you deal with so much, you're taking on a whole lot of other people's problems. But it was hard for me at first. As a Black male therapist, I'm looking for somebody that looks like me. And I didn't really care if it was a Black woman or a Black man, but I wanted it to be somebody that looked like me. So when I got to looking for a person, I continued to come across white people. And like I said, I don't have any issue with white people, but I wanted somebody that looked like me, because there's that piece where that culturally competent matters and being culturally aware. We're dealing with a lot of things in the world right now. You look at all of the protests that are going on, all of the police brutality, the George Floyd situation, the Elijah McCain, the Breonna Taylor, all these things are taking place. And those things right there can be a big factor in people actually going to go to therapy. And so let me just give you this example. So let's say, for instance, you have a Black man that has a mental health related issue. Well, first of all, we're already discriminated against as a Black man. You know, people call us lazy, they call us stupid, they call us poor, unintelligent. And so why, as a Black man, would you go to therapy and tell a white person that, hey, I have this mental health related issue? You're going to give them more ammo to be discriminated against you. And so a lot of times, and even I struggled with it, you know, like sometimes I struggle with social anxiety. And so even I struggled with it. I had to get to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm going to do this for me, because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. But I struggled with it. I was like, why would I go and tell a white person that, hey, you know, I deal with social anxiety sometimes? Then to give them more ammo to just discriminate against me. And a lot of times you see when these police brutality is going on and these white officers are killing these Black men or Black women, that's another reason why a Black male would not go to therapy. Why would I go and talk to somebody that's white? These are the same people that's out here killing us each and every day. So I'm not going to go sit across this table and talk to this white person and they look me in the face when they're the ones out here killing people. So I had to just get them. Go on.
I want to stay right there for a second, because I think that, and Dr. Rubin, I want to bring you in right here, because I think that's something that a lot of us overlooked. Is we were very caught up in what happened last year with George Floyd. We've seen it happen many times more than that, but we were all, I guess, paralyzed by watching this image on TV repeatedly. What did that do to our psyche? I'll be honest with you. I'm probably way more transparent than I need to be about a lot of stuff. But the night that we had the coverage of the unrest here in Tampa, and when it turned to people breaking into things and tearing up stuff and the violence and all the stuff that ensued, at the end of the night, I literally, when we ended our broadcast, I just kind of stopped and was like, it was a lot. It was a lot to absorb. And one of the managers came around, a white male, and he's like, thank you all so much for your professionalism and getting all the story out and blah, 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 blah. But that's kind of what managers do. They wanted to thank everybody for their hard work. When he got done, I said, hey, thank you all very much for making sure this all hit air the right way. And then it just, before I knew it, I was in tears. And I said, and I apologize, but this is different for me. I'm not just watching a story. This is us. This is me. This is, these are my folks. And I realized how much of that I unintentionally internalized. At the time, it was just mechanics doing the story. How do we get past getting that out of our system where it's not a part of our DNA, that stuff that we all have to deal with? And I'll let Dr. Rubin start on that.
So much. That question's so rich. This conversation's so rich. So if I detour, please bring me back. But I think we gotta. I think what's happening as a society is we are not acknowledging illness. And so if you have a sickness and you just keep living life like you don't have cancer, you're going to die slowly. And that's what, as a society, that's what's happening. We have, like, and if somebody said it, it's in your genes. Trauma lives in your genes. You know, the wounds from our ancestors are with us. And so whether you're conscious of it or not, that still affects us. And so, you know, you were talking about anger earlier. Anger, once you can get past, you know, the abrasiveness of anger is sadness unexpressed. It does something to your psyche when you see people who look like you constantly killed, or when you see, the conditions that we are forced to live in systematically. It does something to you, and it does create an inferiority complex, and it does make it hard to ask for help and support because you don't want to seem weak because of these stereotypes. You don't want to reaffirm those stereotypes, and it's important that we start to reframe what courage is like, because we have to lean into courage if we want to confront fear. That's how you beat anxiety. That's how you beat mental illness, courage. So we have to reframe, this idea that seeking help and support is weakness. We need it. And actually, there's nothing wrong with not having all the answers, but it becomes self-sabotage when we know there's a problem and then we don't seek those answers. So we're self-sabotaging ourselves in a lot of instances because of the way we see ourselves and the way that we see strength. We don't see courage as a form of strength. And so that's what I really encourage. Every Black male that I see, I don't see enough of them like as many as I would like, but every time I see them, I always let them know what you did today was courageous. What you did today was courageous. So you reinforce the behavior, and then ideally they'll tell somebody else that, dang, like I had this therapist. And another part of it is self-advocacy. Like every Black therapist is all kinfolk ain't your kinfolk, all skin folks ain't your kinfolks. So just because you got Black skin doesn't mean you're going to understand the Black experience, because the way racial identity works, somebody who's earlier in their racial identity, they might not understand you, or somebody from a different racial context might not understand you. So we have to start learning how to advocate for ourselves, no matter what helper we go to, whether it's mental health or medical professionals. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers that question.
No, it does. And I think you nailed it, because one of the things that I think we all get confused about, and not just us, really it's more non-Black people, is they think that all Black people are a monolith. So they assume that we all vote together, we think the same way, we go to the same barbershop, we eat the same food. And I mean, I may hate chicken. Ain't true, but I may hate it. But they don't know that. So even when you're looking for a therapist, that is probably what you need to remember, that if this person don't work, just like your doctor, change doctors. Mm-hmm. So having said that, what's the best way to look for a therapist? What are some things that you should look for? And because we're all gonna leave here and cross that line, and we're gonna find somebody. We're gonna do that. We all making that declaration tonight. So what do you look for in doing that?
I go first, and I'll just say, as a social worker and a therapist, one thing that I want people to know when it comes to therapy, when you're looking for a therapist, there are no right or wrong answers. You know how when you was in school and the teacher say, hey, there's no stupid answer, there's no stupid question. I tell individuals, when you are seeking counseling, you want to make sure you prepare some type of realistic goals that you want to accomplish. So when you call these therapists, you want to make sure you talk to those therapists about, hey, this is what I'm dealing with. These are the goals I'm trying to accomplish. Can you help me get there? And the good thing about therapists, there are a lot of different therapists with a lot of different theoretical modalities. So every therapist don't practice the same. So, you have some therapists that practice from a cognitive behavior therapy approach, whereas you're looking at those thoughts and how they guide your behavior. You have some therapists that practice from a psychoanalytic approach, where you're looking at those unconscious thoughts that you never actually talk about and how they affect your behavior. So when you're looking for a therapist, you want to find somebody that actually works best for you and actually made to accomplish your goals. Another thing is that We talked about it earlier. You want somebody that is culturally competent, culturally aware of what you're going through. Like we said, everybody that looks like us may not completely understand where we're going through. So that's why you have to actually talk to these individuals. When I think about therapy, I use the analogy all the time. It's like trying on a new pair of shoes for women. You know, women love to try on heels. But even women, when it comes to those heels, you have to keep trying on those heels till you find that perfect fit. So therapy is kind of like speed dating. You know, you may contact somebody, hey, you know, this is some things I'm interested in. Oh, no, you don't line up with my values. You don't line up with what I'm trying to accomplish. Next. Oh, these are some things I'm looking for. Okay, we'll give it a shot. And just knowing that, hey, I may come to you for therapy. I may start off here at point A, but now you're not really helping me meet my needs. So I'm going to go on over here to go to point C. Because at the end of the day, as a therapist, I work for you. My overall goal is for you to eventually put me out of business to the point where you don't need me anymore. Right. You can function on your own, and you can come back to me for mental check-ins. Like Dr. Wright said earlier, you can come back to me 3 or 4 months down the road. Just say, hey, Mr. Jerron, I'm doing a great job. Just want you to know, keep praying for me, keep looking out for me. I'll be coming back in here 3 or 4 months later. But you want to get to the point where you feel comfortable reaching out to that therapist, but not only feel comfortable, also advocating for yourself. Because if you don't advocate for yourself, nobody will advocate for you.
I think Preston Scott's comment nailed it. Therapy takes time. Every session isn't an aha moment. Remember, you pay them. If they don't work for you, move on to the next one. I think that's absolutely key. Can I ask you a question, Jalem and Tavis? I keep coming back to y'all because y'all work with the kids. Is that a conversation that you all ever have with your young guys about? I mean, I know you all talk to them, but do you ever talk to them about talking to therapists at some point? Or
I'll go first. You know, mental health has been very popular right now, especially in schools. You know, they passed initiatives to ensure that teachers and staff are talking about mental health in schools. So the conversation is out there. So, you know, they're wondering what it is and what's going on and why they should and why they shouldn't. So we're definitely having those conversations, and we've actually been fortunate enough to have some events where we're focusing on mental health when we bring in actual clinicians and mental health, professionals to facilitate conversations, and we have yoga sessions and we do different things to really expose the boys to something else that they don't do on the regular. And we've had a lot of success with those events. We did that through an event called A Bunch of Brothers. And, you know, a lot of them feel differently about it. Some of them are used to it because they have to go. They've been going to a therapist since they were younger because they've been on prescribed medicine. But you've got some of them who don't want to hear that. They don't want to talk to their mama or their daddy, let alone somebody else that they got to get, dropped off at. So, you know, a lot of our boys are in a lot of different places, and we just really have to be patient with them when we're delivering the conversation to them, so where we're not like, you need to go get checked out, you need to talk to somebody. Right. Because nobody wants to be talked at. So it really has to do with our delivery. If we make it look good, we make it sound good. We bring therapists on like you guys to come and, show them that this is what my therapist could look like. Then, they wouldn't have a problem with coming to talk, to some therapists that look like that. That would be a whole nother ball game for them.
Yeah, grown men don't want to be told to go do something. So I know young men don't. Tavis, same question for you. Is it a discussion that you guys have at all, or?
It is a discussion that we have because, as I said earlier, for us, it's we're always encouraging kids to verbalize their thoughts and their feelings. Even as a former high school administrator here in Hillsborough County, I often had kids that just wanted to talk to someone, but they felt like they couldn't because the guidance counselors didn't look like them, or the social worker or the school psychologist didn't look like them. So they didn't know how to say it without feeling like that person was going to judge them or ridicule them for whatever they were thinking or feeling. So what's really important is just trying to create avenues so that students do have opportunities to share. It's hard in Hillsborough County because even when you think about the numbers of social workers and school psychologists that are in our schools, research says that we have the lowest rate in the state when it comes to the ratio between school psychologists to students or social workers to students. So when I say the lowest, I mean our schools, they're doing 1,000 students for every school psychologist or 1,000 students for every school social worker, when the state says the number should really be around 250 kids for every social worker or 500 kids for every school psychologist. So it's not even enough people in our schools for the kids to actually have somebody to talk to, which is why it's important, even more important, for us to have our mentoring programs and have these outlets where these kids can come together and communicate their thoughts and their feelings in a safe environment.
How has this pandemic, and not just for the the students, because that's important too, but how has this pandemic really played a role in the mental health of Black men? And I want to go to Carl Davis on that, because I know you're still out and about and seeing things. How have we been impacted by this?
Absolutely. If you haven't really prepared yourself to become resilient, and especially during this epidemic, you have fallen behind the curve. And one of the things that during this time, it's just a personal experience myself. I was able to at least check in with myself, and I still go back to that self-awareness. What can I possibly do to maintain a sense of who I am? I started doing home projects like doing yard work and planting a garden, a flower garden. I started working on an entrepreneurship venture, and all those things allowed me to really sort of connect with myself. One of the things that also kept me connected with doing what we're doing right now, having Zoom calls and sort of going back and forth, volleying back and forth with other colleagues to talk about what aspect of their lives have been impacted by this epidemic. So I would say for a person, especially a Black man, to really that's surviving through this era of non-existent. This is the time right now to sort of play catch up. Okay, all around us, when you have idle time, pick up a book to read. That was extremely important. I did so much reading. Turn off that television and pick up a book to read. Do the things that you thought that, let me try something different. So it changed the neurons in your mind. Mm-hmm. And so we have an opportunity now while things were slow to sort of play catch up. And I believe that was one of the things that helped me, being able to pick up a book, really start doing some things I normally wouldn't do. And I started becoming more productive, and my sense of well-being and my sense of resilience became stronger as time went on. So I sort of springboarded, forward instead of falling back.
I say.
Yeah, that's actually good. It's really interesting, though. I think it really kind of uncovered all of these disparities that we as people of color face anyway in the first place. The health disparities that we face. And there is something traumatic about living in fear and seclusion. If you think about that, a lot of us had to seclude ourselves because you're in fear of, the pandemic and everything that could happen. How do you deal with that? And Dr. Rubin, I'll ask you, what are some ways, because we're still in the middle of this thing, what are some ways that Black men specifically can deal with this fear of COVID, if there is one? And, not everybody is, but a lot of people are concerned about that. And then, kind of being secluded off from people.
So can you ask me that question again? Because I have something in my mind I want to say, and I'm like, I don't know if that's going to answer this question, but
well, now I just want to hear what you have to say. So
I think when I think of pandemic, we've been in a pandemic since before Corona, and we've been in a pandemic of racism. So this is, if there's any time to activate your Black powers, it's now. So I was thinking, because y'all asked me the media question, I came up with the phrase is less distraction, more action. Okay. Less distraction, more action. Less distraction, more action. So less distraction. We need to filter the media that we take in. I haven't had a TV in any of the places I've lived in for the last 3 or 4 years, because I know the messages that I get, it's not helping me. It's not serving me. It's not building me into anything that I want. That's no shame to the folks who do it, because that's a form of self-care for some folks, but not me. But be mindful of what you take in. And that's just not with media. That's everything. Be mindful what you put into your body. A lot of us, and this is no shame, but just because we keeping it real, a lot of us eat like we're slaves still. We still have the same diet from slavery. I haven't eaten a piece of meat in the last 3 or 4 years because I know what it does to my body. I know what it's done to our culture, right? It pains me when I see my family eat. You know, we could go down that road, but y'all see what I'm saying. Emotionally too. What are the messages that we're taking in? I like trap music, so I'm not saying I'm perfect. It's black or white, but I'm mindful of when I consume it. Maybe I'll just keep it for the gym. You know, maybe I'll listen to Sade at other times. You know, some other things that are gentle, you know, or more enriching or building to my spirit. Intellectually, read a book. There's the knowledge is right there. I mean, we are out of bondage. They prevented us from reading, but now the books are there. We don't even want to read anymore. That's some internalized racism. We got to learn. We cannot depend on people to teach us we can't depend on our oppressors to teach us liberation. That's just not possible. So less dependency. We can't be dependent. We can't expect that people are going to rescue us from racism. I'm not waiting on Kamala. I'm not waiting on Biden to do anything to save us. I know that I am the start of change. And so more of what? More knowledge. Know thyself. Know thyself. It's to the point where there's nothing, you can call me the N-word. I don't care what you call me because I'm so confident in who I am. It doesn't matter what you tell me. And that's a scary thing for a lot of people. I can't tell you how many people have said, Ruben, you're just so, I just don't know what it is about you. Because it's power. I found my power and you're intimidated. You're scared, right? And the last one is more resources. Use the resources around you. I feel so blessed to be connected to these brothers now that I'm in Tampa. And I hope we can maximize each other because we don't have to do it alone. Individualism is a trap that's been programmed into us. In Africa, we were a collective. We didn't even have countries in Africa. We had tribes and we all worked intercommunally. But because of colonialism, because of racism, white supremacy, we've detached from that. So we need less distraction, more action.
I love it.
I like that.
You have been nailing the statements today, sir.
I like that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So where do we go from here? I don't want to just, have a discussion about the issue because we could do that. And I agree that it's important, but what in your opinions, and I'll start with Carl and then we'll work our way around. What is the next step for us as men to keep this conversation going, but then to turn this conversation into a plan of action?
We can invest in
our brothers, all of us, with our mental health.
We can invest in mental health, and that's extremely important. Turn some dollars towards more levels of care when it comes down to therapists, investing in mental health, investing in education as well, being able to keep people abreast of what's going on around them. Invest in job opportunity. That's important. Grow the economy and stuff. And so, when I think Black men, when they see things moving in such a prosperous manner, and stuff, that gives them hope. Housing is extremely important. The environment we live in allow people to be able to, have such a way to move out of areas of distress, or at least improve the areas that they're living in. And then one other thing is just being able to protect Black lives and stuff. When it comes down to the quality of education, jobs, housing and stuff, you have to look at being able to incubate those areas and stuff so Black men can survive in this environment. So those are some of the things that I believe we can do moving forward, that we can invest in.
Tavis.
If I can add to when he says invest in education and invest in mental health, as they put more money into mental health and to provide more social workers and school psychologists on our school sites, it's important to also increase the time that these psychologists and social workers can spend actually working with the youth. Sometimes, and I know from working on a school campus, sometimes these individuals get bogged down with the paperwork and bogged down with the tasks that they're given outside of actually supporting the mental health of students, that they don't get to do it. I've seen I've seen students waiting outside their social worker's office or their guidance counselor's office wanting to talk to them, and the social worker looks at them and say, I don't really have time to talk to you right now. So now this kid is about to walk away and you don't really know what they're thinking, what mood they're in at that point. Or they're thinking, I just talked to this kid yesterday, but you don't even know when their breaking point is. And so sometimes they have to not just add more of those individuals, but as they add more, increase the amount of time that they can spend working with those students and actually counseling and supporting them. I also would like to see our school districts spend more money on mentoring programs and putting more mentoring programs within our school sites, and not just the traditional school sites, but I think sometimes we forget about those untraditional school sites. For example, if a kid is in a DJJ program, like at the jail, they're in some type of school setting as well. And those students need mentoring as well, because when they at some point, they have to transition back into society. And if we don't support them to figure out whatever the root cause was that caused them to be there and the psychological damage or warfare as a result of being there, unfortunately, they're going to continue in this cycle that could possibly cause them to end right back up there. So I think mentoring programs are very valuable. And I think sometimes people underplay the role of our programs in the lives of these Black and brown boys. So I think that's just as important. Thank you.
Dr. Wright.
I agree with you, Tavis, relative to the mentoring aspect. I've worked very closely with Men of Vision, Mr. Ross Anderson, and I've seen him turn some ships around. I've emceed about 6 of his programs, and then on one or two occasions, we learned of a few kids who had all D's. I mean, were just literally failing. But because they wanted to partake in the Men of Vision experience, they promised Mr. Anderson they would go to a high school and turn things around. And one kid did just that. He went from D's to 3.0 above average. Now, I was the MC of that program. I believe we were at the theater in Ybor City. And as the MC, I was sitting there tearing because of the testimony of what transpired with that young man with the Men of Vision. I also think we got to learn to eat healthy. We've got to learn to be very careful about what we put in our bodies. At my age, I'm learning that even the more that I have to be very careful about preparing my meals and how I prepare them, less sodium, and making sure I eat less meat so I can sort of be healthy, because I suffer from gout and a few other issues, and I got to be very careful. Exercise is something that I'm really guilty of, and I said, Lord, please help me, because I used to do it all the time. When I was a young man, I used to tear up a dance floor. That kept me active and kept my weight off of me. But as soon as I stopped being able to cut a rug, I started gaining weight. And I'm telling you, I just got to do better. And I really need to do that at my old age. And then let me say this too. We have issues, particularly Black men, because of the stress under which we have lived. I was diagnosed with prostate cancer a couple of years ago. And I was totally in awe when I found out about it from Dr. Starling, a brother who's a urologist here who went to the University of Florida, an awesome urologist. And we have to check ourselves out. We can't be that manly that we can't go to the urologist and check ourselves out. Because by being obedient, I would probably could be able to give 15 or 20 years of my life by going and having what I needed to get done to take care of my prostate. And they say if any Black man lives long enough, he certainly may be diagnosed with prostate cancer. So brothers, get yourselves checked and don't wait until the 11th hour. Get it done early, because you just never know. Some young men have problems with prostate. I just believe that we should continue being positive. I believe in keeping the faith. I will die keeping the faith, because I would tell people all the time. I've had friends right now. One of my friends just lost his wife, and this, Mr. That owned 56th Street Florist, Wayne Green. He said, Dr. Wright, you would come to my office, my shop, and you would tell me 3 words: keep the faith. And that meant more to me than anything. There were times when I really need to hear it, and you weren't in my presence. I kept hearing you say, keep the faith. Brothers, you got to keep the faith. You give out before you give in.
Dr. Wright, thank you. By the way, at least 2 or 3 people put in the comments that say, wait, you still can tear up a rug. I mean, I'm just saying. So apparently, you may have think you stopped, but you can still cut her up. John Brown, your final thoughts on just an action item for people now.
Well, I would say, I think also it kind of starts with debunking the myths of mental health, because at the end of the day, if you're not right mentally, you're not going to be right everywhere else. And so I think we have to do, and notice I say we because it's going to be a collective effort. Normalizing mental health, making sure that we pour into each other as brothers, but making sure that we continue to hold each other accountable. We can't depend on the women to always hold us accountable. Something that men don't do enough of. I'm just going to be honest. We don't hold each other accountable enough. Right. We sweep stuff under the rug. Oh, your friend doing this, your friend doing that. You got to hold them accountable. Also, just talking about mental health and letting people know that it doesn't have to be a death sentence. You can live freely with a mental health related issue. I'm going to say one thing. And I think we're moving forward with it because I'm starting to see an uptick in celebrities talking about more so about mental health. And I'm just going to be real. Let's call it what it is. I know Dr. Rubin said something about it earlier. When it comes to role models, you don't hear enough people talking about intellectuals and people like that. But people that they do talk about as role models, the LeBron James of the world. They talk about Brandon Marshall, a football player. But one thing that these brothers are actually doing, they're talking about mental health. And so any conversation about mental health is good conversation, whether it comes from your celebrities all the way down. I was in a room talking to some people today, and there was a warden. He was the youngest African-American warden. And he got to talking about how he serves at a prison. A lot of times at a prison, there's a lot of African-American men. He said that at that prison, they got on a conversation talking about mental health. He said, but the conversation didn't start until the OGs, the people that had been there a long time, that were full of wisdom and knowledge, they started the conversation. He said once they started the conversation, the younger guys that were in the prison and the people that hadn't been there as long, they started coming together. They started asking questions. How can we get these mental health services in our prison? Are we getting the services that we deserve right here? Are we getting the services that we need? But the conversation didn't start until those OGs held those people accountable and started the conversation. And so I say that notion because if we continue to pour into each other, it don't take the professionals, your aunt, your uncles, your cousins, your brothers. If we continue to encourage them and enlighten them about mental health, they'll be more so inclined to enlighten others. Sometimes going to talk to a professional can be scary. We don't always want to go talk to a professional because some people are scared to talk to a professional, but you would talk to your brother. You would talk to your friend that you go out here and go to the club with on weekends. You would talk to your friend that's out here cheating. I mean, I'm just going to call it what it is. So if we can talk to these friends, our brothers, our uncles about mental health, we can continue to build community. And once we continue to build that community, we can continue to help our African-American men grow up to be emotionally aware and emotionally strong men.
Dr. Rubin, action items.
All right. Y'all already got, first off, I just want to acknowledge the gentleman in this chat. I'm really inspired by you all. And of course, the Black women who threw this together. Black women have been holding us down since we could be held down. I just got to throw that out there. So y'all already got the less distraction, more action. But so that's there. The other part I want to focus on is it's time to mask up. It's time to really mask up. And I'm not talking about the coronavirus mask, y'all. I'm talking about how we take care of ourselves. I'm talking about self-care. Because again, we're distracted. We're focused on too many things. And so this metaphor, if you've been blessed to be on a plane, the flight attendant does the spiel before the plane takes off. And then they talk about what happens if the cabin depressurizes and there's no oxygen. These masks are going to fall. Who do they say put that mask on first? They say put it on yourself first. They don't say put it on the next person first. Why? Because if you try to put it on the next person first, you're going to be you might be helping them, but who's dying in the meantime? Who becomes a liability in the meantime? Mm-hmm. So what we need to start doing is focusing on our needs. Put the mask on yourself first. And people get this confused. People say, oh, that's selfish. No, taking care of yourself is not selfish, because what happens is when you put that mask on first, when you start taking care of your needs first, you then have the capacity to help people around you. You're not a liability to the people around you. You're not killing yourself. So what this means is we got to start taking care of ourselves physically. What are we doing to our body? What aren't we doing for our body? Emotionally, what are we doing for our heart? We got trauma, y'all. The trauma doesn't go away on its own. We got to deal with it. We can't keep pushing it down because it's going to come up. It's like a bottle under pressure. What are we doing intellectually, y'all? We're not going to get taught liberation unless we go get it on our own. I spent 6 years in school and they did not teach me how to free my people. They did not teach me how to do counseling with my people. I had to do that on my own on top of the PhD. And spiritually, y'all, this does not have to be religious. It can be, but what is that soul in your body bag about? What is your purpose here? Why are you here? And what are you going to do with the time that we're here on this earth? So put your mask on, figure these things out. And like you said, keep, like Dr. Samuel said, keep the faith. We can do this and we will do it.
All right.
Jalem, final thoughts.
Brothers. Y'all hit it all on the head already. But what I really want to highlight what you said, Mr. Myrick, about how important mentoring is in the schools and in the DJJ programs, because we're seeing those kids each and every day, and we see firsthand, that even in the midst of the pandemic, even in the midst of schools closing, e-learning going on, the needs have not changed. And now probably more than ever, the needs have multiplied. So there needs to be funding for mentoring. It needs to be a lot more of it going on. And it doesn't need to just be 4, 3, 2 programs, but as many mentoring programs as there can be, because it's 1 million boys and it's no way that, 5 mentoring groups are going to be able to serve and save all the boys. So what I really wanted to say, when you first asked the question, Rod, about what are the action steps? Get to the streets. Let's do the work. They need to see brothers like y'all as therapists, as counselors, so that they know that they have somebody that looks like them, that they can talk to, that's not going to judge them, that's not going to look at them any kind of way, that's going to understand the things that they're saying, the way that they're talking, the things that are going on in their lives. They need to see y'all. We as brothers, we need to get connected. We need to do better with leaning on each other and being there for each other. I'm glad Jerron said we need to hold each other accountable, because we do. So when they see that in us, they'll start to mimic that with their peers and their teenagers and their little brothers and their little cousins and the little ones that are coming behind them. So if we are role models of what we want them to do, that'll be a start. And then I'm really glad what you said, Dr. Rubin, about, the collective, because, what it's really going to take is everything, and all of us working together to do it. It's going to take the teachers, it's going to take the therapists, it's going to take the parents, it's going to take the grandparents, the aunties, the uncles, the barbers. It's going to take everything. It's going to take a community effort to really, do what needs to be done. So what I'm going to say to people is to, especially the brothers, to be present in whatever your space is and whatever your role is, whatever you do it at, be present. Because sometimes just being there and them just seeing you is enough. You ain't got to open your mouth. You ain't got to give a 50-minute speech. You ain't got to tell them about all your awards and all your certifications. Sometimes nobody want to hear that. They just want to know that there's somebody there that will listen and that will be there for them. So the action step is to get out there, get to the streets, get to the people, to the boys that nobody want to talk to, the boys that people are scared to ask questions. We really got to get out there. If we don't get out there, we're just going to keep on getting and reaching the same boys who are going to come to the same stuff, and we're going to keep having the same conversation with the same brothers who are always going to come. We have to get creative with our outreach. We got to try it a different way. We got to try it this way, that way, to really get to everybody. And that's what I'm just going to leave y'all with. Let's do the work. Let's get out there.
So thank you all very, very much. I'm going to just say that I think this is a conversation that needs a part 2. I'm just going to put that out there. If you're watching this, post about this, talk about it, and use the hashtag TBSparkChange if you really want to see a part 2. There were so many things that we could have gotten to. Talk about how insurance plays a role in whether people can get there. Talk about the economics of where we are as a people and how that impacts what we're doing. But the last thought I'll say before I bring Tammy up is, Jalem, I completely agree with you. We have to be present, and not everyone has to do the same thing. So know your strengths, know those things that you do well, and do that thing. I think they say stay in your lane. Stay in your lane. Do what you do. And if all of us do that, then we become that collective. We become that village that we ancestrally have been. And I don't care what nobody say, nobody coined that "it takes a village" term. That's ours. That's always been ours. No matter who says it all the time, it's ours because it's our village. So thank you, gentlemen, so much. Seriously, this has been amazingly uplifting. So Tammy's back. I'm gonna let her talk. I'm gonna hit the mute button, and thank you all so much for this great conversation. And a big thank you to everybody who was watching.
Awesome.
You guys had some wonderful comments and questions. And part 2, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. Thank you.
My goodness, thank you so much, fellas. My heart is heavy. My heart's happy. This was so good, y'all. This was historic. And just sitting back and watching you all, I mean, I was literally in tears. I had a church dance. I did all types of stuff sitting on my seat. This is what we need to see. This is what we need to see more often. Our Black men, like, sharing their hearts, sharing their souls, and pouring out truth. This is what it looks like, y'all. Just take this image and let it just be tattooed to your brains, because this was absolutely amazing. So thank you all, Rod, Carl, Tavis, Jalem, Dr. Rubin, Jerron, Dr. Samuel. Thank you. We are so honored by all of you tonight. Thank you all for attending. We definitely want to do a part 2. So follow Tampa Bay Spark. Follow all of these amazing men as well. Follow them. They're doing incredible work in the community. So definitely follow their work. We're honored to have them on their panel. Follow Tampa Bay Spark. We will have a part 2, and we'll make sure that happens. Follow us on our socials. What we'll also do too is make sure you subscribe to our newsletters, because we will be sharing resources for Black men, specifically on mental health, resources in the community. We'll also talk about what is being done to address this particular issue. So definitely make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter, and then stay tuned, because we'll be back and we'll have this conversation again. Everybody have a wonderful night. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thank you all.
Ashe.
Ashe, ashe.
Mhm.
Power.